Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, and welcome to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast, where sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like cons.
Hey, my name is Alex. I am a writer of horror and science fiction, and I've written some short stories of that ilk. And most recently, I had a story in the big issue fiction edition. Although that was almost exactly a year ago now, so I'm thinking I might need to come up with some new material.
Hi, my name is Matan. I'm also a writer, part of Precipice Fiction, published a few short stories, and I teach English during the day to a bunch of high schoolers who are not fully aware of what they're missing out on when it comes to Shakespeare, which I will discuss soon.
So today we want to discuss some of the tools in our writer's tool belt, I guess, and some of the writing techniques or storytelling techniques that we swear by, that we go by, that we love reading or that we admire in other authors, and things that we'd like to develop and use ourselves. But before we jump into that topic, I'd like to ask you guys, what he is reading, what he is consuming media-wise at the moment.
Recently, today, I just bought a video game called Infernax, which I've started playing, and it's based on sort of an old NES 8-bit style video game. It's like it's kind of like Castlevania, like one of the really old Castlevanias, but just imagine you made it like really, really gory, and it's really awesome. And, it's very much scratching that nostalgic itch. Other than that, just been reading a bit of Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. I've actually got it right here. Really good book, just detailing the life and times of that illustrious chef, essentially.
Okay, me. All right. So, as you guys know, I'm doing my bachelor's of English literature, so I am reading a lot of stuff that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. And I feel like I'm coming late to the party, but man, Shakespeare is freaking great. I wasn't sure how I'm gonna react to it because you have this idea, you have these words like thy, yonder, all this kind of stuff. Do you bite your thumb? All these things that you think, is this gonna be a barrier? But no, the guy is freaking funny. I'm sitting here in 2024 and I'm laughing my ass off because okay, I'll be specific. We've been recently reading Romeo and Juliet. And if you haven't read it, you're thinking, okay, it's probably this cheesy romantic tragedy. But what I didn't expect is the first 30% to be basically comedy. And it's so freaking hilarious. I don't know if you two had the chance to read it, but
Yeah.
it kind of feels like storytelling today draws so much from Shakespeare, and we're not even necessarily aware of it. So many times I've seen sentences that have kind of existed in the ether. Like I've seen the sentence, a plague on both your houses, and me being ignorant, I didn't know it comes from Shakespeare. But if someone told me, hey, have you heard that sentence before? Yeah, I heard it somewhere. So that's the thing. Even if you don't actively read Shakespeare, you probably hear it just in the English language. I'm done fanboying over Shakespeare, but it's really great. And probably in the next 10 meetings, you will hear me discuss plays as we go.
Nice. Yeah,
Nice.
great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being enlightened, having the Shakespeare share. I'm rereading at the moment. I'm rereading The Call of the Wild.
Nice.
Which is a Jack London book, but a dog that gets dog napped and put into a dog sled and made run up and down the Great Northern Wilderness. Really beautifully written book, really good. Ask you guys if there's any writing techniques or any storytelling techniques that you particularly enjoy reading. If you're picking up a book and you're kind of maybe 200, 300 pages in and you're starting to notice a certain dynamic or a certain arc is starting to get set up, is there something that you're kind of like, oh yes, I love when this is happening, or I love when this is going on?
Yeah, so not necessarily like 200 or 300 pages in, just by dint of the actual construction of the technique itself. But I'm a really big fan of certainly for writing, but also for reading the in medias res concept. So the idea is you just start in the middle. I think it's literally Latin for like begin, as things are, you know. And it's just what I like about that technique is it feels just very not condescending to the audience. It's like, hey, here's some stuff that's happening. Not only is it are you dropped right into the action of it, which is just very exciting by itself, but it also doesn't pander. It doesn't feel the need to explain itself to you. You trust the audience enough that they're like, you know, like if you're reading this, you're gonna pick this up and you're gonna figure out exactly what, you know, what is going on here just based on the cues. And if it's a good enough writer, a lot of that will naturally come across in the inflections of the characters and the situation and the dialogue and the idiom and sort of thing. So yeah, I am a really big fan of that, to, you know, just to get things going, to be like, hey, boom, we're right here. Go and figure it out for yourself, you know. The Bear, the TV show The Bear is really good for that. It's just like you'll start off like, you know, just basically right in the kitchen as things are sort of like blowing up, and like you're not given very little context, and you just have to work it out based on, you know, what's happening there. So yeah, that'd be my example.
That's a good example. I was gonna throw in Pulp Fiction. You literally start with two dudes in a car on the way to you know, to have a conversation with someone. But that's really an example.
No, you've mixed.
Oh, right,
it up.
no, it
starts
starts with the
two-
guys in the
two sitting
diner.
in the
It
restaurant.
starts in them in the diner.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's also in medias res. That's almost in the end game.
The whole movie is
There's no setup. It's just you're dropped
exactly
right in.
the cold open, we can call it, you know, the words basically. You're in the middle. If anyone has watched Shogun, has anyone watched that one?
No, not yet.
I haven't yet, but I really want to. It looks really good.
Starts with an action scene. These people are in troubles. We can call it, I was going to say in medias res too. I think that's absolutely almost essential nowadays, because I think the modern reader just either doesn't have the patience or just isn't interested in the whole traditional exposition. But yeah, I definitely think Alex brought up a great piece of storytelling advice.
Well, you have to remember as well that not only is it like about a lack of patience, it's also about a greater understanding of tropes. And like, we're steeped in all this history, like thousands and thousands of years of history. And it's all at our fingertips, and we're sort of inculcated in it in school and stuff. So a lot of this stuff is like, okay, so I watched the like Fallout recently, and it's just we're dropped in immediately. We can tell we're sort of in the 50s, but also it's a little bit sci-fi. If you have any familiarity with the IP, you're going to realize that there's a cowboy. We can just, like, you can just see things immediately without, you know, someone needing to go, it was the year 2050, and like it's just so much of our culture is just steeped in tropes and history and ideas that we're all familiar with, that a lot of it can just be absorbed naturally through osmosis.
Yeah, I was just recently watching a YouTube thing of advice to like what publishers are and aren't looking for, and one of the pieces of advice was starting a story off not necessarily at the beginning, but finding that big action that's about to happen in the beginning and just getting to that as quickly as possible, even starting just before that and launching right into not your inciting incident, but launching into a big conflict right at the very beginning to get all the characters and get all the motivations set up and stuff. And Alex, you actually utilized, I think, in media res really well in your story Town Hall Steps, which we published in the new Mythic. Town Hall Steps jumps in right at the beginning. Right
when the action is about to start.
Exactly.
Then it actually goes back. We actually had a big chat about like, how can we go back and tell this the history of this without making it feel clunky and that sort of thing. So we had to sort of shoehorn it into a specific, I say we because we all edited it together, into, you know, you had to find the exact spot where that was going to go. But yeah, that very much started, you know, like right as it was beginning.
Matan, how about yourself?
Something I really like, I don't know if I can do it well, so I'll put it in the category of what I enjoy, is dual protagonists that are not necessarily allies. In what I mean by that is that you have 2 point of views, 2 perspectives, they don't have to be exactly opposite as much as like maybe get on each other's nerves, or maybe even their objectives cannot coexist. I'll say a movie and a book. And the movie that I really liked it is the movie called The Departed. I think it's 2006. Matt Damon plays the son of a gangster who's infiltrating the police. Leonardo DiCaprio is playing a police officer infiltrating the mafia. And they're giving you reasons to be invested in both. They're kind of rising at the same time in their respective organizations. And what I love about it is the promise that one of them has to lose. Spoiler alert, they both lose. Spoiler. Never mind. The point is that you get this. I couldn't help myself. The promise is that one of them has to kind of lose, but you kind of like them both, and you really want to see how their various interactions are going to end up, because sometimes one of them comes up on top. A lot of the times their interactions are actually not direct, because they're kind of following each other's footprints, trying to discover the other. And in a movie, I love it because, first of all, promise of action, promise of conflict, promise of a resolution. I kind of know that one has to fail for the other to succeed. So I thought that works really well. In a book that does it well, where the perspectives are not necessarily opposite, but they do add a lot, is the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, in which he has many perspectives. He has Kaladin, the main, you could call him the main character, but he also has other characters that, while they don't naturally oppose that protagonist, they do kind of get in the way, and you kind of know that when they meet, usually one of them will get closer to the objective, sometimes at the cost of the other character, or it just adds a different angle to certain moments. So I like it when I have more than one protagonist when I watch a movie, if both of them are engaging and worthy of being invested, because you kind of don't want to spread yourself too thin, I guess. If you have 6 or 7 main characters, it's kind of hard to get attached.
Have you read Rambo: First Blood?
I did not know that was a book. Okay.
It was originally a book. Yeah.
Proceed.
If you're familiar with the film, you probably already know the storyline. But Rambo does that really well with the two protagonists. It jumps from the sheriff to Rambo, back and forth, and like one of them is always, it's like a cat and mouse, but one of them, who's the cat, is always changing. So certainly the first 2/3 of that book utilize that so well. So if you enjoy the dual protagonists, I'd recommend checking out Rambo.
Cool. Yeah. You made me think of No Country for Old Men for some reason.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember who the good guy is in that though. Like just
the good guy is Josh Brolin, and I guess Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones is like the good.
Like the villain of that is just so compelling. He just takes up the whole movie. That friggin' haircut, man.
I got that haircut. That haircut.
So good.
You know,
yeah.
And his weapon. Strange. He's got that weapon. The thing that what is it? It the way he lock the doors with it just made me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Spooky guy.
He finds a lot of use for that.
Watch No Country for Old Men. It's a very nice movie.
It's great. It's very good. Very, very disturbing.
Something that I love reading, if I come across it, or usually it's something that I notice when I've gotten to the end of a book or a story and I'm looking back on it, is you have, it's not dual protagonists, but you might have one protagonist, but they're within some kind of a group, or at least just some kind of dynamic going on, where I guess usually four different motivations or different values, and they're all competing with one another during the story. So everyone is challenging the protagonist, but then everyone is also kind of fighting amongst themselves, and sometimes the characters in opposite corners will find themselves sharing a motivation or sharing a value, so then they'll agree on something and they'll outnumber the other characters. So that makes for constant dynamic conflict throughout the whole story. I've tried it out a few times, and it's quite tricky to really get it quite precise all the way through. But I find any little implementation of that level of conflict makes a story more interesting. Even if you're using 3 characters, like Harry Potter is a great example. You've got Harry, and then he has Ron and Hermione, and not all of those characters are getting on at the same time. Sometimes, he's not talking to Ron for this reason, or sometimes he's not talking to Hermione. So that works really well in that like trifecta. So if you can manage to pop in a fort and then just put them all at the opposite sides of a specific argument, that can I find that really compelling in a story. You can find it quite difficult to put down.
Yeah.
I mentioned on a previous podcast that the girl with all the gifts does that.
I'm reading it right now. Very good.
Oh yeah,
Very good.
it's opera. I love that.
Very well plotted too. Very well plotted.
Yes, yeah. It's very. That's like my bar for the perfect 4-point opposition. Because that is it just feels so tight all the way through. It works really well. And people always use the Dark Knight trilogy as well as an example of good 4-point opposition.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how it always fits in, but I know in the Dark Knight, the first one, yeah, okay.
Batman Begins.
So I was thinking of the second one.
Okay.
Because I think they have there's different characters. The line is basically like, who wants order? It's kind of the Joker is here, and Batman it's kind of like vigilante justice, but then the cop is kind of order and justice and stuff like that. So
it's like an alignment chart essentially, right? But just a very
basically
yeah.
Divide the characters along a different axis. So works quite
I
well.
think that a book that does it really well, James, is Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. If anyone has read it,
Six of Crows.
It's basically a fantasy heist book.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
Where you got like 6 characters that are kind of involved in this heist, but all of them have like a secret motivation for the heist that doesn't really align with the rest of the crew's motivations. Like one of them just wants all the money to buy back something. One of them wants to run away to be with her parents. One is in love with the one that wants to run away. One is actually a spy for a different faction. And you kind of know a lot of these secret motivations and you learn them as you go. And that adds a lot of tension because you got the main conflict, which is the heist, but you know that when that's resolved, if it's resolved, there is still going to be like, okay, now we got through that. What are they going to do when it's time to decide whether to like backstab your friends for your other motivation? So they're all pulling in different directions.
Yeah, it inherently creates a lot of tension having those opposing motivations. One I would like to bring up. This is a pretty simple one, but I think it's very effective. Use of present tense. I find that to be especially in a short-ish book, or alternatively one that is able to change characters. Like I said, I'm reading through The Girl with All the Gifts right now, and that's done in present tense. And the thing that I like about it, it works really, really well for thrillers because there's this immediacy to it. It's like it's not just happened in the past; it's happening right now. You're right there. There's this sort of like this lean-in factor that you like. It just feels more visceral in some way. So, I mean, the quintessential example for me would probably be The Hunger Games. And it works so especially well in that because it's such a close in. I mean, it's first person as well, so that's you've got the double whammy. You've got that we are literally in Katniss's head, and also it's happening in real time. So you're kind of reacting as she's reacting to these things. So it just gives it this real immediacy that I like. Sometimes it can. If it's not done well, it can also be it can be like a little bit too much. It can get like a little bit too I don't know, it can just feel a little bit claustrophobic. But I think in the hands of a skilled author, it's a really, really effective way to, especially if you're able to modulate the pace and the tension and stuff. It's a really good way to just keep things moving.
Yeah, I like it. I've written Glyphlight in present tense. It was the first serious thing that I've written in present tense. Much for the same reasons that you mentioned. I wanted to have a bit more immediacy, a bit more, because there's something about the past tense that kind of conveys that it's over.
Yeah.
And if it's over, especially in first person past tense is like, oh, if he's telling us the story, he must have lived to tell it.
Yeah, that's it.
There,
There's the
it,
tension.
it, yeah, it's almost unspoken. There is something I like. Again, I try to do it. I don't know if I'm successful in it. And I'm not too heavy-handed, but I think stories really benefit from having a good red herring, which is basically red herring is when you are directed towards a certain truth. It's not spelled out. If it's spelled out, it's not a red herring. It's a blatant lie. The author is lying to you. But a red herring is when the author puts hints that something is A while it's actually B. It's almost like when a magician tries to draw your attention to the magician's assistant, usually attractive magician's assistant, while they're doing something else somewhere else. And that makes it satisfying because you don't feel like I was lied to. You feel like, ooh, my attention was in the wrong place. Had I looked in the other place, I would have seen it. So a good red herring is followed side by side by hints that betray the real truth. And I think a perfect example for that, it came up in the podcast before, is the first Harry Potter, where the red herring, okay, so Harry thinks someone is helping Lord Voldemort, someone is trying to get the Sorcerer's Stone, and the red herring is that it is Professor Snape. We have all the evidence, like he hates Harry, he had a problem with his father, he's the head of Slytherin, which is like the bad house, and the kids suspected, and no one really tells them that it isn't Snape. At the same time, we kind of see Professor Quirrell in situations that kind of imply that, you know, he was he was gone for a few months, he looks a bit jumpy, he's the one that sees the troll. So again, a good red herring, I think, is one that upon a second reading doesn't fully obscure the truth, but just presents a more attractive alternative to the truth. And I think that one makes it satisfying.
Nice. Something I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to kind of put a little caveat that I'm kind of expanding it beyond what it usually means. Hiding the monster tends to be putting off, you know, in a story where you have a monster, you can't really show the monster right at the beginning because then it loses all of its power. So you try to save your big reveal of your monster till the end. And you do that by having little moments throughout the story where, you know, you see the fin of the shark going through the water, or where you see the moon rising and you know werewolves are going to come or vampires are going to come or whatever. So it's all these little moments of getting basically getting use out of your monster without actually kind of robbing it of all of its big impact to the end. And I'm trying to think of, because I enjoy figuring out ways of doing that in horror stories, and something I've noticed a lot with even stories outside of horror, as I'm trying to kind of branch out a little bit, if I feel like I'm working towards the third act or I'm working towards a big climactic moment, I have a much better time plotting that story. But then I still need to figure out what are my little along the way, which are utilizing the premise or utilizing the ultimate conflict, but still having little bits of conflict or little moments throughout. So kind of thinking of it as I've taken Hiding the Monster out of horror and tried to put it in something else. And I'm finding I'm having a lot more progress doing it that way. But yeah, I guess the technique I would describe is kind of trying to find these little moments to kind of utilize maybe the try-fail cycle, or to utilize conflicts or dynamics that are very specific to that story or to that conflict that's going on, and trying to get a bit of more mileage out of it before you get to the end point of your story.
I love that. I think it's something that you almost come to expect. I think if you open any monster movie trailer on YouTube, especially the first trailer, the reveal trailer of a movie, if it shows the monster, you'll see in the comment section people like literally upset, like, oh, why did you show me the monster? Now I don't want to watch the movie. It is a thing. People do not want to see, like, they want to come to the movie to get to see the monster in its full glory. And I like how you took it, because it's not just a horror thing, is it? The monster, quote unquote, can be the real mastermind. It can be the secret. It can be the big twist. We want to kind of get it in bite-sized pieces throughout the novel, and to give us a chance either to figure it out ourselves or just to enjoy the process a bit more. I think that's extremely important in sci-fi, where you have a lot of times the story leads to revelation. Like, has anyone read the book Sphere by, I forgot the author's name, but he wrote Jurassic Park as well.
Oh yeah, Michael Crichton. Yeah, Sphere. Sphere. Yeah, I have read Sphere. Yeah. It's a great book.
So exactly, it all starts with a mystery, right? There's this sphere at the bottom of the ocean. Am I correct? No one knows how it got there. No one knows what's inside. Even after they get inside, there's another door they can't get into. Right? So basically, the slow reveal. What is this? And in the end, you get this mind-blowing revelation, similar to showing the fin of the shark. Okay, there's a sphere. Maybe it's not from this world. Maybe it's the Russians. We don't know. And gradually show your hand.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually, speaking of Michael Crichton, it's actually the same in the book of Jurassic Park, which he wrote right after that. You don't see any dinosaurs doing anything crazy for a good third of the novel. And then I think the big reveal T-Rex, and that's the big watershed sort of like moment where you're like, oh shoot. And then there's a whole sequence of, because once the monster comes out, whatever it is, be it a 50-foot tall lizard or a sphere that has magical powers, it's kind of like, okay, well, we've seen it. The tension is dispelled, and that tension can be anything. I mean, it could be a mystery as well, like who was the killer? Who, in this closed room murder mystery, like who was the one who ultimately did it? And you wait till right at the end to do that. So yeah, and I remember reading, like when I read Jurassic Park, I remember at that point, because it was not terribly long through the novel, I was like, oh, okay, well that's, whenever you read something and it's building up something, once you see that thing, it's a bit like, oh, that was cool. But then it's like there's the rest of the novel to get through. So in theory, and this is really only one style of arc, there's a whole lot of other things as character development and all that sort of thing. But in theory, in like a monster movie or a monster book, you would wait till right at the end to do that. And I think something like Cloverfield does that really well. It's like it's all footage.
But Cloverfield,
Cloverfield
took teasing to a whole another level. At some point in Cloverfield, like, can someone freaking press pause on this recording so I can have a good look? Yeah, that's Cloverfield. Like, stop shaking, you idiot! I want to see its face.
Amateurs.
Yeah, but that's part of the appeal. It's like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that movie messed me up. I don't know why. What is it about that movie? Speaking of slow reveals, I don't know.
That final sequence, I think, when they're in a house, is just so tense.
Yeah.
It draws out and it draws out and it draws out. Yeah. All right. So I guess the last thing I wanted to ask was, is there any techniques, is there any storytelling tools that you're working on at the moment, or that you're hoping to develop, or something that you'd like to experiment with?
I really like the idea of the parallel story. Like one thing I've noticed about a lot of books is they'll have Stephen King classically does this in it. It's like you've got one story that's going on in the present tense, and then you have one story that's going on in the past tense. And the way that he's able to keep that going is, what's easy in the present tense because it hasn't happened yet. We're being told it. But in the past tense one, you were never really told what happened. You just know that it's this really traumatic event that occurred, and like one of the people in that is actually dead. They've offed themselves because it was basically so traumatic. So that when it kind of goes back, they're just like, no, I can't deal with this. But yeah, just that sense of keeping that parallel tension. It's a really good way to divide up a book, because like you can just kind of jump between these two different levels of tension and release. So when one thing is really, really tense, then you classically do the rug pull and go, and then they were just sitting in the kitchen eating peanut butter sandwiches, like stuff like that. There's this really nice, you can shift between it nice and easily. So that's a technique I would like to experiment with. And that doesn't necessarily have to be with time. I mean, it could theoretically be you know, with people, like we talked about the dueling protagonists. You could do that way as well. But yeah, just having that push and pull between these two different stories running in tandem.
Yeah, that sounds difficult to pull off, but like,
Mm.
I gotta be honest, Alex, you have the reputation of being a non-plotter. So I do wonder what would come of you holding two, you know, like shaking plots, writing themselves as you go, one in the past, one in the present.
I kind of did it with the two characters in Challenger, with the, like, there's the cop and the kid, you know, and I think the cop storyline is just not.
Yeah, but not in different timelines.
No,
one
true.
has to feed into the other.
Well, I think you'd need
Yeah.
one point that you're like, well, hang on, it gets to this. Like, I don't think I could do
Yeah.
without at least some, you know. I feel like I'm probably more of a plotter now than I was. Like, certainly not to the full extent, but like, I like those big conduits. You know?
I'm glad you've seen the light. I decided to be patient with you. I told myself, don't push him. You know, it will come to the conclusion himself. You know,
He'll see the
press.
light. He'll see the light. Yeah.
Well, we
Comes to the
meet,
big event. You know?
we meet every Thursday outside the church. If you want to come to our plotter meetings, James and Ali and me are there probably. Yeah.
AP.
We have name tags.
No.
Like, my name is Matan.
PA, Pants is Anonymous.
Oh God. Stephen King probably found that one.
Yeah. Nah.
And then
he's still
the turtle came from space. And
you know
they had
what?
to
I
kiss
still
it.
like that. I still like. I'm not. I don't hate that plot point. I know you think.
I think the
Space
turtle
turtle?
from space. I think the turtle from space is great.
Yeah, I like the
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Mr. King, if you ever listen to this, I also think the space turtle is great.
No, you don't.
Hey, don't you destroy my relationship with my mentor, okay?
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, Stephen. You're great. Something I really want to do. I don't know if it's a technique that I haven't done, but it is something I'm putting emphasis on. Just, I want to juggle multiple conflicts at the same time. I want to, and I mean external conflicts, because inner conflicts, I think I've got it, you know, inner conflict, outer conflict, okay. But I really want to master the art of on like page by page tension and page by page try fail cycle, like James mentioned, to have these mini conflicts scattered throughout on the way to the large conflict. Because I've discovered when I read a book that effectively does that, I really enjoy it. I think that's the books that are most readable to me. That's the most page flipped per minute for me usually. Again, the name of the wind to me is probably the gold standard in mini conflicts. Maybe not the gold standard in big conflicts, but definitely in mini conflicts, it definitely does that very well, which is just every page has a problem and they don't feel contrived. They feel like, yeah, he needs to buy a shirt. Yeah, he needs to pay tuition. Yeah, he needs to, you know, deal with the fact that his crush is with someone else on a date. These mini conflicts really work for me. They feel organic, and it's hard without it, you know, going into melodrama, which is, I think, James, you do editing too. Alex, you definitely read a lot for other people. And that's something that I think a lot of writers kind of fall into unintentionally. I need tension. I'm going to have this character be upset. But when it doesn't feel earned, when the conflict is just someone being angry at a misunderstanding or something, it just comes off as melodramatic. It doesn't feel like genuine clash of interest as much as, why can't they just sort it out? Why if your conflict is that the guy was rude to the salesman at the store, that feels a bit cheap. That's what I'm trying to say. The conflict should be that he can't afford buying the books he needs for school. That's not a conflict that's based on someone being sassy, if that makes sense.
All right.
Yeah, it's the conflict is coming from a legitimate motivation or character flaw or arc. It's a product of a greater issue. You know, it's a natural extrapolation of that core theme.
I was smiling literally because I'd listened to that person talking about it the day before, And I was like, oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I'll jump back in with I'll just go with my own. Something I'm looking at the moment, and something I'm trying to work on, is the found family or the chosen family, which is something I might have written a little bit of before, but I never looked at it as being kind of central to the story, or kind of actually looked up the dynamics of it, or what makes people enjoy it, or what kind of stories would it count as. It's the kind of story that tends to be about a group of often misfits who maybe don't know each other, who for one reason or another come together as part of a group, and then over the course of the story they all end up like forming a bond and forming friendships and relying on each other, and that ends up becoming quite a large motivator. The actual group and the group dynamic ends up becoming both the motivator but also the source of a lot of conflict and a lot of the story drive throughout the story. So something I'm working on at the moment, I think I've found, is going to have to require a pretty strong sense of that as it goes through it. So that's something I'm looking up at the moment and trying to figure out the best way of going about it, and what are the do's and don'ts, and what breaks that kind of story and what makes that kind of story work. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Nice. I love a good found family story.
Yeah.
I think characters that like other characters, there's something inherently likable about that. Like we root for characters that genuinely care about other characters. So that's a trope. Can we call it a trope? I don't know. I guess. I think that's a trope that works really well, I think. If it feels earned.
I personally find myself drawn towards like actual family dramas, because I think there's a lot of fun tension in the fact that we have to be together because we are literally family, even though we may not like each other, but we have to almost find a way to work together. It's almost like a military band that have been thrown together, and it's like, well, we don't like each other, but we got to complete the mission. But like, you know, like obviously on a more domestic sort of level. So I like that, you know, there's strength to be found in either of those concepts. I think found family.
Absolutely.
I think.
Do you want to call it there?
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
Go.
Yeah, we can go for now.
Yeah. Or do you have anything else? Do you have any more you just want to talk about?
Let me check. No, I just had like stream of consciousness, but like I don't have much to say about that really.
Modernist writing. I have to do a project on that, Alex.
Oh yeah?
Please recommend a good modernist piece of work, a short story. I was thinking Virginia Woolf. Something else.
Yeah. I actually did a course on this. I'm trying to think of there's Don DeLillo's pretty good. It's a little modernist. You know what? Try reading Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. That's pretty modernist. That might be post.
Cat's Cradle?
Cat's Cradle, yeah. It's a great book.
Cat's Cradle.
Okay,
yeah, man. I got to write 15 pages on that, so
yeah. No, that's a good one to start with. It's very Kurt Vonnegut, that's for sure.
When you describe someone like that, it's like, yeah, okay. It's
yeah.
Sure.
It's just he's the only person who can write like that. Or if you can't, a book that I actually prefer of his, but that is not as highly regarded, is Breakfast of Champions. I really like that one. I actually prefer Cat's Cradle, but Cat's Cradle is the classic. Yeah.
Is Kurt Vonnegut was he an addict?
No. Are you thinking of William Burroughs?
I know stream of consciousness, or at least the people who started it, is often associated with usually drinkers.
Yeah.
I
don't know why you'd say that.
I think
something.
Is the guy who wrote LA Diaries? Who they think they attribute that style of writing to him, and I think he just wrote it on napkin while he was drinking. And then he made it into a novel.
Oh wait,
I think
LA Diaries. Okay. Well, the definitive stream of consciousness novel is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. That's a masterpiece.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a long time ago. Yeah,
that's an absolute masterpiece. I don't know if I call it modernist though. I'm not sure if it's, because I think it's like
yeah.
But I think
apparently Google says it's Ulysses, which may be the godfather of stream of conscience.
I can see that. That's one of those books.
But I'm not going to do my project on Ulysses. Okay, I've got enough on my plate.
That's one of those books that I always want to get a coffee table like version of and just like peruse it, just read a few pages. Like that's been all ever since I did it.
Alex, just write "I'm smart" on your forehead, okay?
Oh,
Save us the trouble.
stop.
I remember, Alex, when one time you told me that you decided to read all the Man Booker Prize winners, and I'm like,
Didn't get
wow,
very far through that.
you're such a high quality reader, man. Like, meanwhile, me and Paddy are reading the Saxon Warlord series about a guy who has sex and wins wars all the time. The last
Yeah, but you're also
That's
reading
basically it.
Paul and Shakespeare. Like, I think.
Yeah,
you
because
might have
I'm
a view on
graded
me
on
there.
it.
What's that?
You know, I'm not doing it for fun. I love Shakespeare, but I kind of have to.
Well, fair enough.
Professor,
break,
if you're
brother.
ever listening to this, I am enjoying every second of your course.
We should have a professor off episode. Everyone shows up and one person just like holds like a round table over like who's
Who's the best?
the most illiterary.
I put my money on Alex. I gotta be honest.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Oh yeah, I think it'd be a good
Like,
be a
what's
good
the
showdown 'cause no one
five?
wants to be the winner.
What's the 5 things you've read that you're most proud of on an intellectual level?
Is that a legitimate
That
question?
should be the conversation.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
James Healy. James, you'll probably say Cormac McCarthy, right?
What are the most what? Sorry, what was the question? I didn't think I was
What's the 5 things you don't have to? We don't have to do this now. But what have you read that you're intellectually proud of?
Oh, I can throw out like the Leo Tolstoy and Dostoevsky.
Ah, yeah. Punishment.
Usually stuff from like 100 or so years ago. That is kind of like a classic.
Tale of Two Cities. Anyone?
I haven't
I
read
haven't read Tale of Two Cities. No.
Charles Dickens.
Maybe
Okay, I'm not out of the race completely. Okay. I got some things to contribute.
Yeah, I'd say Kafka. I love Kafka. Kafka's great. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
read it, but didn't you feel like you
I
need a
haven't read
shower?
any Kafka.
Yeah, and I kind of like that.
I like that feeling. I like the dirty feeling inside my brain. Yeah.
Like just a speck in the Arsene universe.
I got Metamorphosis as a gift from my brother,
Yeah, wow.
and like that's when I started to question, like, does my brother love me? No, I'm joking.
It's bleak. It's real bleak.
Yeah, it's really big. Yeah, a huge cockroach going down the stairs. Anyway,
All right, so I think that about sums it up. Thanks very much, listeners, and yeah, we hope that if you found any of these tools or any of techniques useful in your own writing, definitely try them out or experiment with them. Give us your own thoughts if there's any that you prefer, if there's any that you like to come across in stories, and yeah, keep an eye out for them if anything that you like or anything you'd be interested in looking at. Yeah, that's great. That's we're in Pros and Cons, Precipice Fiction. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.